Hello and welcome to our first flipped video of the year. I'm pretty excited about this. I'm going to try and remind you about different things you should be doing each time that you watch the video and fill out your note sheet. So the first thing I want you to do is to turn to the front of your binder where we put the table of contents, and I would like you to fill in order of operations day 1. And then I'd also like you to put in today's date. You can pause the video right now and do that. So when you're watching these videos, it's very important to have your binder, and in your binder I already mentioned the table of contents and the note sheet. So you'll have the note sheet for order of operations day 1. And obviously you'll want a pencil, and I'm going to say no calculator for this first lesson, so we're going to do these with no calculator. Okay, now on your note sheet you'll notice a spot to write down the objective. In each of these videos we're going to state our objectives, just like I do in class, and you probably remember this from class. YWBAT stands for, do you remember? You will be able to, and today it's going to be apply the order of operations and grouping symbols to simplify expressions. So what I'd like you to do right now is to hit pause and fill in that portion of your worksheet. So in the objective we talked about the order of operations. You will evaluate an expression by finding its value, and you'll do this by working the problem. So evaluate means to get the expression in simplest form and keep working the problem out until, in this case, until we get a number or an integer. So we have a problem to start the lesson off with. Jack and Jill were asked to evaluate the expression 3 plus 4 times 2, and they both got different answers. Jack got 14 and Jill got 11. What I want you to do is pause and just kind of think to yourself about what you know about the order of operations and try and guess who did it correctly. Who did the problem correctly? Which answer is right? Well, Jack explained himself. He showed his work. And what he did first was he did 3 plus 4 and he got 7, and then he multiplied by 2 and he got 14. Jill showed her work, and she did 4 times 2 first and got 8, and then she did 3 plus 8 is 11. So think about which one do you think is right. Well, in mathematics, if we just let people solve problems however they wanted to, we would get different answers all the time, especially depending on which order people wrote things in. So to make sure that there were rules to follow, mathematicians came up with the order of operations. And that way, if everyone follows these order of operations, they'll always get the same answer based on the problem and the way it's written. So let's talk about what the order of operations are. And you know what? I bet a lot of you have seen this already. Some of you call it PEMDAS. We call it GEMDAS. You might have heard, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. What I'm going to do is tell you what each of these stands for, and I bet you probably know most of them. So the G stands for grouping symbols. And when we say grouping symbols, there are different kinds. There's parentheses, there's also brackets, and there's something called braces. Not the kind that's in your mouth or on your teeth. And also we're going to talk about absolute value this chapter, and absolute value looks like 2 vertical lines. And there's my favorite grouping symbol. I did not leave myself much room for this. My favorite grouping symbol is called a vinculum, and it's a horizontal line. I'll talk more about that later, but that's one of my favorite grouping symbols. The next step in order of operations after grouping symbols would be exponents. And I'm sure you are familiar with what exponents are. They would look something like 3 to the second power or x to the second power. And we'll talk more about exponents in this lesson. The next order of operations after exponents would be multiply, multiply, multiply. Okay, sorry about the technical difficulties. As you can tell, it's kind of my first time doing these videos, so just be patient with me and help me get through it. But we multiply or divide is what I was trying to say. Multiply or divide, and it's important that we do that left to right. Left to right. And I'll give you examples later on in this video. But let's talk about multiply. Many of you know 2 times 4. And this year we might say 2.4 means 2 multiplied to 4. We could also say 3 multiplied to 5 by using a parenthesis. Whenever you have a number next to a parenthesis, it means to multiply. And division, we all remember 16 divided by sign 2. We could also say 16 over 2. It would mean the same thing. Those are ways to show division. All right, so you've probably guessed the last step. The last step is to add or subtract. And just like multiply and divide, it's add or subtract left to right. Many people think that you always add before you subtract. That's not the case. You could subtract before you add, just like you could divide before you multiply. So on these last 2 categories, it's left to right. That's very important to remember. So what we're going to do now is continue on and start to apply some of these operations to expressions. Okay, as a warm-up, we're going to identify the steps that we use to evaluate an expression and to apply the order of operations. And we're going to use these practice problems as a way to warm up for that. So we look at our first practice problem. We have 10 minus 3 times 2. So following the order of operations, we would multiply before we subtract. So our first operation will be multiply, and we would do 3 times 2, and we would show our work, and we would get a 6 and bring down the 10. So we would have 10 minus 6. So our second operation for this example would be subtraction. And 10 minus 6 is 4, so we got the right answer. Looking at our next problem, we have 4 times 3 next to a parentheses 2, and we know that that means that they're going to multiply. So this means 3 times 2. So our first operation here is going to be multiplication. So 4 times 3 is 12, and we'll bring that 2 down. And the parentheses, the 12 next to the parentheses means to multiply. So 2 times 12, so our second operation will be multiply. And you all know what 12 times 2 is. 12 times 2 is 24, so that checks out. So our last example problem is a parentheses. We have 8 minus 5 in parentheses. Then we have times 2 to the second power. So I want you to hit pause and think, which would we do first? Look down here, which of these would be our first operation? Hit pause and fill in your sheet and see if you did it correctly. I bet you were right. You probably said the parentheses. So parentheses, a grouping symbol. So 8 minus 5 is 3, and we bring down the times sign, and we bring down 2 to the second power. So now I want you to predict, we did the parentheses, I want you to predict what would be next. Would it be the 3 times 2, or would it be the 2 to the second power? All right, hit pause and do your prediction. What's the second operation? Again, I bet you're right. I bet you did it correctly. Hopefully you picked evaluate powers, or we wrote down exponents in our notes. So powers and exponents are close to the same thing. We'll get into that later. They're pretty much the same. There's a little discrepancy. So if we do exponents as our second step, 2 to the second power is 4. So we have a 4. So we have 3 times 4. 3 times 4 is 12. And so that's our third step, is that we multiplied. We multiplied 3 times 4 to get 12. And I think on your note sheet there's an error right here. I can't remember, but I think it said 4. So there was an error there, and I think there is an error up here also. So I did notice that. Unfortunately, I noticed it while I was doing this. So we can talk about that in class. Okay, so now we think back to the original question that we started the lesson with. Jack and Jill were asked to evaluate that expression. So who was right? And looking back to the order of operations, which operation would you do first? And my guess is you already know that you would do the 4 times 2 first, and you would get 8, and 8 plus 3 is 11. So you'd multiply before adding, even though the multiplication appears on the right-hand side. We have a few example problems to practice with here, and like I said before, they get a little longer now, but if we follow the order of operations, we should be able to get the correct answers. So we're going to simplify these expressions. So the first thing we're going to do are grouping symbols. So look at this problem, and I want you to underline the grouping symbol right now and then hit pause. Underline the grouping symbol. Hopefully you underline this, and that's what we're going to do first. So bring everything else down. Bring down the 17, the minus 3 times 5, plus, and then now you can simplify the parentheses. 9 plus 3 is 12, plus 12, and then bring down the divided by 4. It's very important to show your work, and I know that many of you can say, but I can do it in my head. But for me, this year, and if you have me next year, it's very important that you show your work so that you have a path that you can see what you did. So we looked for all the grouping symbols, and once you're sure that you've done all of the grouping symbols, it's a good idea to cross it off and then go on to the next step in the order of operations. We have exponents, and if we look at the expression, there are no exponents in this expression, so we can cross that off. Now we're on multiply divide. Remember, this is left to right. Left to right. So I start at the left and I look, and the first multiplication I see is right here. And then I continue and I do see division here. So if you want, bring down the 17, and then 3 times 5 is 15. Do the multiplication because it appeared first, left to right, and then the plus sign, and you can do the 12 divided by 4 is 3. Now look at your problem. Are there any more multiplying or dividing parts of it? No, there aren't. So cross off, multiply, divide. Okay, so now we're down to add or subtract left to right. So we look here, we start on the left, and we have 17 minus 15. We do that first. 17 minus 15 is 2. Then we have 2 plus 3. We bring down the 2 and bring down the 3. So 2 plus 3 is 5. If we do it correctly, it almost looks like a funnel. Each line gets smaller and smaller till you end up with one answer at the end. And that's how I'd like you to show your work when you're solving these problems. Okay, so just like the last problem, first thing we're looking for are grouping symbols, parentheses and brackets and things. So underline that grouping symbol right now. Hopefully this is what you underlined. And let's look at this parentheses. So we have two operations inside there. When you're in a parentheses, you still follow the order of operations. So we have a multiply and we have a subtraction. So we're going to do multiply because it comes before subtraction in the order of operations. So we did the 4 multiplied to 2 and we got 8. So now we still have the parentheses, so we still have to simplify that. So we'll do the 8 minus 3 and we'll get a 5. And then we'll bring the rest of the problem down. So 24 minus 6 divided by 3 plus the 5 that we got from the parentheses. So that parentheses is gone now. And we have no more grouping symbols, so we can cross off our grouping symbols. So now we'll move on to exponents. And if you look, there are no exponents. There are no exponents in this expression, so we can move on to multiply and divide. So multiply or divide, the first thing we see is division. So we have 6 divided by 3. So we're going to bring down the 24. 24 minus, and instead of 6 divided by 3, we'll say what that equals. 6 divided by 3 is 2, and then bring down the 5. Looking, we have 24 we have 24 minus 2 plus 5. So all of our multiplying and dividing is done, so we can cross that off. Well, lastly, we have add or subtract. So remember what I said, just because the A appears first in GEMDAS does not mean that we always add first. You subtract first before you add sometimes. It's all left to right. So we have 24 minus 2 and then plus 5. So we're going to do the subtraction first this time. 24 minus 2 is 22, and then we'll add the 5 last. So we get an answer of 27. And always remember to circle your final answer. Our last example problem looks a little more complicated, but it'll be easy if we follow our steps. So again, we always start with our grouping symbols, and we have 2 of them. We have brackets and we have parentheses. When that happens, always do the one that's the most inner one, the one that's inside of the other grouping symbol. So we're going to do the 2 plus 1 first and get a 3. And then, as always, we bring the rest of the problem down. Bring down the 2, bring down the bracket, and we bring down the 15 divided by, now it's divided by 3 because we substituted for the parentheses, plus 6, bring down the other bracket, okay. So now, we look at our problem now, we still have a grouping symbol, we still have brackets. So we're going to have to do what's inside. And just like I said before, follow the order of operations. So we're going to do division before addition, because that's the order of operations. So we bring down the 2 and we bring down the bracket and we do 15 divided by 3 is 5. And then bring down the plus 6, bring down the bracket, and then bring down the minus 7. We still have a grouping symbol, we still have it, so we're going to continue and do 5 plus 6 because it's in the brackets. So 2, bracket, 11, and then that should be our next step. Well, we still do have a grouping symbol here if we look, but this grouping symbol is telling us to take the 2 and there's an invisible multiplication dot right there. So this means when you have a number next to a bracket or next to a parentheses, it means to multiply them. So we're actually done with the grouping symbols, even though this bracket's here. This bracket is just holding one number. It's kind of doing a multiplication role right now. We have no exponents, so now we do 2 times 11, and that's 22, and we bring down the minus 7. So all of our multiplying and dividing is done, and our last step is going to be the subtraction. So 22 minus 7 is 15, and that should be your final answer. Hopefully you got that. So what I want you to do now is you can replay this video and watch it as many times as you need to and pause until you feel that you understand how to do this. And then I want you to do the practice problems on your worksheet and bring them the next day, and we'll see how you did on those. Okay? All right. You did great for your first video. See you tomorrow.